Hello, welcome to this episode of The Cut. Today we have Brian Kane with us, our new student pastor, and I am Leya Martinez. Before we get into this past Sunday's sermon where Luke Thomas from Knoxville talked through self-pity, before we get into that, which we've got some good things to talk about.
Yes, we do.
Brian is going to share a little bit about who you are. We won't get too existential there.
Yeah. That's good.
And then we'll get into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the first things we're going to be talking about in youth group is who are we supposed to be, right? Typically we ask, what am I supposed to do? I'm a follower of Jesus, now what am I supposed to do? But first he wants us to be a certain person and to be his people and to be those who learn from him and stumble and fall. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of my journey. I didn't become a follower of Jesus until like junior, senior year of high school. And I could get into all those details, but if you want those details, I'd love to talk to you and sit down over coffee or something, talk to you about that. But a lot of adoption is part of my story. Divorce is part of my story. Teenage angst and heartbreak is part of my story. And I eventually came to a point where nothing was meeting a need, the need, my deepest need. And I thought that I could fill that with a lot of different things. But eventually came to a point where I had heard about this Jesus guy. My grandma had been praying for me all throughout my life.
What would we do without grandmas?
I know. Seriously. Seriously.
Not a joke.
When it comes to faithfulness, talking about grandmas is like at the top of the list. So talked with her. And then my first introduction to Christianity was Jesus, which is the best type of introduction to Christianity. And eventually just, a small part of my story is I was that kid, sitting with my soccer buddies at the lunch table, reading the first Christian book I found at Lifeway.
And what was that?
I don't know if I want to share that. Talk to me and I'll share that with you. But it wasn't a good book. But it's still, the Lord used it and it was still in some ways formative. I know. But man, reading that at the lunch table and with all my buddies who talked about what soccer guys talk about in public school at times. And I was just, it was just this moment of, I feel something's different. I know something's different. And, I'm sitting there reading this book at the table and they're, what in the world are you doing? And, I'm just like, man, I don't know what happened, but something happened. And, my allegiance is now to someone so much greater, and didn't use that language then, but
I was going to say, wow,
super
impressed.
Yeah, it was just like that. I became
your verbiage. Yeah,
I became a theologian of sorts. But ever since then, it's been a journey. That was 12 years ago. So it's been a journey ever since. So yeah.
I mean, what a perfect. Just thinking like how God redeems and uses everything, like what a perfect story to be working with youth. And you're married.
Yes.
Wife Andrea.
Absolutely.
You have two kids.
Yep. Mabry is 4 and Haddon is 2. And I'm very excited for them to officially be here with me.
Yes.
Which will be the beginning of July. Yes, Andrea is the joy of my life. I don't know where I would be without her. We've been married for 6 years. And my daughter Mabry's 4 and my son Haddon is 2. And they are just at the phase right now where you got to have both sets of eyes on them at all times because they play well together 50% of the time, and the other 50% of the time, Mabry has Haddon in a headlock, and you never know if he'll tap. So he doesn't typically tap. He just tries to bear through it. But yeah, they are a joy.
Well, if you all are around Redeemer, if you are part of the Redeemer family, please give Brian and then very soon his whole family a very warm welcome. And if you're not, you can send him an email.
Yeah. Become a part of the family.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, do you want to go ahead and get us
going
absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Our sermon?
So I have my Bible. I'm going to grab it really quick. So we may actually end up spending a majority of this time talking about one word. And I think that this one word that it's the very beginning of the sermon reading, Lamentations 3:19. The author says, Jeremiah says, "Remember my affliction and my wanderings." And this is Jeremiah saying to God, this is what I'm going through, and I know that, but do you know that? Like,
are you on the same page?
Are you aware of what's happening to me? And man, that's what, like, as Luke was, like, that's what God wants. Like, God wants us to relate and to commune with him. And I brought 4 books that we probably won't get into talking about or recommending.
We're going to actually read through one book.
The entirety of one book. And I actually, one of the books, it's called, this is the only one of this stack that I've not read. It's new, came out in 2021. And it's called Abraham's Silence. It's, so like I said, I haven't read it, can't endorse it. Can't endorse it wholeheartedly. Right. But what I can endorse is the thought experiment that it seems like the author wants us to partake in, because he alludes to Moses interceding on behalf of the Israelites in Exodus 32, when God says, this is a stiff-necked people. They have rebelled beyond repair. I'm going to destroy them. And Moses does what God wants Moses to do, and that's intercede, right? Like he enters into, he's the mediator between God and man, and says, remember your covenant, remember your faithfulness, remember Abraham, remember Isaac, remember Jacob. And man, like that's what God wants. That is the epitome of a relationship, of saying, to you, hey, Leya, I know you're this way. I know you're awesome, and you're not being awesome. So be awesome, right? Right? Like the epitome of a relation. If I can say that to you, that says something about you and I's relationship.
That's right.
Right? So it's just such a cool, like I said, haven't read that one. The other ones are about lament. And we can put those where, Leya?
We're going to put those in the show notes.
In the show notes.
That's my favorite phrase. But yeah, I think we wanted to talk a little bit more about the lament that he started to go into, that Luke started to go into on Sunday. He started to talk about that with his church in Knoxville, and the practice of that as a people kind of being the antidote to the individual self-pity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And it was in the midst of COVID, right, that they were walking through this. And just the beauty of, he was talking about 2 forms of pride, one being pretty obvious in boasting, and the other one being less obvious, which is self-pity.
Yep.
And, it is tough to be pitiful of self when you are in the midst of people who love you and who care about you and who are also walking through different things, right? So it's easy to wallow in self-pity. I love the way that he said, you can throw a pity party for yourself, but it's a party that no one really wants to go to, right? Like
you probably don't want to be at it, really.
Right. And if you do, it's just because you want people to recognize you and to acknowledge what you're walking through. But when you do that with a family, and the best family, which is an eternal family, you as a group can say, this is what I'm walking through, and this is who I know God is.
Yep.
And you can not only commune, as he said, vertically with God, but horizontally with God's people.
Yeah, like community that Bryce was talking about 2 weeks ago is like a mirror that's being held up, and we can see a truer reflection of ourselves because of the people we're in community with. If I only have a relationship with myself and no one else.
Right.
A really very narrow view.
Right.
Just my perspective.
Right.
But when I see myself reflected from other people, I didn't know. Ooh, that's not good. Right. And at the same time too, it's like when you're surrounded by God's people, you're thinking about more than just you, and you're thinking about more than just how God has wronged you, or you're thinking about others. Like you're thinking about
you get to embody exactly what Jesus embodied. And like, he's not only the perfect example of that, but, Luke addressed this too on the cross, saying, Lord, forgive them.
Yep.
Like, I'm forgiving my enemies. I'm forgiving the ones who put me on here. And when we can, with God's people, remind one another of that.
That's exactly right.
Right? Like,
that's exactly right.
It's,
we talked about that a little bit a few podcasts ago when we were talking about some church hurt things. And we were talking about when you forgive, you have to die to something, right? Because you're not holding something over someone anymore.
Right.
You're dying to that thing. And so it's a hard thing to do it. We're not good at it. And so I think that's why we also need community to practice the act of forgiving.
Yes.
And to see it done, to model it, and then to have a safe place to practice it.
Right. And to do it before you feel like doing it.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Like Luke talked about that too. Like, it's not something, forgiveness is not something that you feel like forgiving someone and then you forgive someone.
But rather,
it's
the right thing to do. That this is the way, right? This is the way to follow Jesus. It's the way to have real community, good community where we can be iron sharpening iron.
Yes, exactly.
But I have to be faithful and follow through and do it, even though my heart might have to be a few steps behind.
Right. And that's...
just pray that it's going to get there.
Right. And it will. And it will. Like, and God will be faithful to... We are shaped in so many ways by, the practices that Jesus says will shape us. And forgiveness is one of them. Turning the other cheek and giving your enemy a cup of cold water. Like, these are things you don't want to do, but these are things that are, like you said, they are the way.
I mean, Jesus is talking about, going the extra mile. It's in regards to like a soldier, a Roman soldier who are your, like overlords. That's not the right word that I'm wanting to use, but I can't think of the right word, but they're like your master.
Yeah.
And they're saying to you like, hey, you have to do this. And instead of the response being like, okay, I guess I'll do this. Hey, let me go a little bit farther. Let me do more than what you asked me to do, right? Let me serve you in this. And in that way, they're not actually the Lord over you, right?
Right.
By doing that, you're actually undercutting the intention there. I don't even know where I was going with all of that.
No,
that's to say like that we all have our enemy or our quote unquote, that's the bad guy or that's the other.
Right.
And to instead, Jesus is saying like, no, we're called to love them. And when you love them, you start to see them as your brother and not like the other or the enemy.
Yes.
They're not, I'm not against them.
Yeah.
Even if they're against me, I'm not against them.
Right. And that is the epitome of the gospel.
Yeah.
Is that,
isn't that beautiful?
Like, while we were enemies, Christ died for us. And now we get to be, and whenever you guys were sharing before the sermon about the art show coming up, like being the word ambassador. I don't know if it was you who used the word, but
no, I don't think
just
so.
Being an ambassador, and that's one way of being an ambassador is, being on mission and painting and doing all of these different things. We are being representatives of a greater kingdom that is here and that is coming.
Yes.
That we get to partake in right now.
Right now.
And Christ as the one who is the first fruits of that, right? Like walking in his footsteps and learning from him. It's such a beautiful, it doesn't become about us, right?
That's exactly
right. There's no, what is self-pity when that's the case, right?
The more that we walk into it, the more that it's like we crave more of that. Yes. And so not to say that like self-pity becomes impossible, but I would say that it becomes a lot harder to go to that place the more that you're in that community that you're becoming more like Christ. It's a little harder to slip into the self-pity.
Yes. Oh, for sure. For sure. Because you're seeing it being played out around you and you're being reminded of how Christ, though he had every reason, right? Every reason, forsaken by God, right? God forsaken by God. He had every reason to wallow, especially as the perfect God-man, right? Like, man,
have
if
a
anyone
place to lay his head.
Right, no place to lay his head. It's just to know that's what he walked, and that's what we're promised. We get to partake. That leads me to one of the other books. So there's an endorsement on this book that I was trying to figure out, how can I sum up these books really, really well. So this is a book. This is more from lament from the like perspective of worship.
Okay.
So lament as worship.
Sure.
Larry Crabb, he's a psychologist. He endorsed this book, and I thought it summed up the book perfectly. He says, "Life is unspeakably sad until you recover the lost language of lament. Then it becomes speakably sad, and an authentic journey into his presence begins." So not saying that like things are all rosy, like not trying to cover it up, right? But giving language,
when we're able to put words onto something, words onto feelings.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a path forward.
There's a way to talk about it, and a way to speak about it, and a way to recover, and a way to, it becomes speakably sad. That's just such a, it's such a beautiful way of saying it, because that's the reality, right? Like the reality is that God has restored us, and we are being restored.
Yes.
Right? Like
we're in this liminal space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's a space where like we are able to experience more of who God is by using the language that he's given us, right? In his word. Where we can say, God, remember your promises, remember who you are. It just opens up a door of man, we can experience who God is, because like we know who he is. Like we know that he will be faithful. We know that he'll be faithful to his promises to us. And it allows us then to speak in a way that is honest.
And I think this is what you're saying. When we look up and our eyes are on Christ, it's not that our problems disappear, and it's not that the pain and maybe even the suffering that we're dealing with go away, but it's put in right perspective because of Christ's suffering, and because of the life that he lived and the death that he died and the promise of new life. And so all of a sudden, it's not that my problems are gone,
right?
But it's that I don't have to have the self-pity and the wallowing and the everybody should feel really sorry for me because of what I have to deal with, because it's put in perspective of the cross.
Yes. And the community then reminds you, this is real.
Yeah.
But guess what is even realer?
More.
Yeah, right.
I love that you said that.
Guess what you get to experience now, and even more beauty later, right?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Well, thanks for tuning in, Brian.
Yes.
I cannot tell you all how excited I am for you to be here.
It's so good to be here.
I never smile, and I have been smiling so much.
Yeah, right. I've never seen. Yeah, I was about to say, this is the first time I've ever seen you smile. Yeah,
that's right. I've never smiled. No, I'm so excited that you guys are here, and just really, excited about what's next.
Yeah, what a good first sermon to hear, because it's like my first sermon that I hear as a staff member is one that I've seen in my short time being here to be true, right? Of people wanting to form community, of people wanting to do these things together, looking around while taking communion on Sunday and seeing small groups, couples, just like together wanting to see, being honest, right? And remembering who God truly is. Like what a joyous. So thank you for allowing me to step in here and be a part of this. It's cool. It's really cool.
Well, we love you, and we can't wait to love and know you more.
Love you guys too. Thank you so much.
All right. Till next time.